Welcome to Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes from their first to their worst. We're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, a 30-something-year-old teeny bopper, me. Yes, I'm back again because in a week that my ultimate crush, Backstreet Boys Nick Carter, celebrates his birthday, I just had to do a whole ass episode and week dedicated to the glory that is boy bands. From the ones that made my mama's generation squeal to the K-pop group that is currently taking over the world, and all the other ones in between that made their respective generation overly hormonal. So let's get to it. When Benjamin Carlton was on the show, he said something that really stood out. So much so, I think that I've used it in like 2 other episodes so far since speaking with him. He said that humans are always just trying to find their tribe. And for me, connecting with people who were into the same stuff in regards to music and pop culture has always been my way of sparking friendships up. Because let's face it, when you're a shy, weird, fat kid, what else do you got? I met 99.9% of my friends after high school in line at concerts waiting for bands like Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, and Jack's Mannequin. But my oldest and dearest friendship all started back in 4th grade thanks to a boy band. At the time, me and this girl had other BFFs. Me and mine were total tomboys. And she and her bestie brought Barbies to school and meowed and barked at each other during recess. Yeah, they were those girls. Anyways, that year, this really cool girl transferred to our elementary school, supposedly from Hawaii. And mine and this other girl's BFFs saw this new alpha female with Spice Girl tickets in hand and flocked to her like a moth to a bug zapper. Which was fine because middle school was right around the corner, and let's be real, we've all seen Pin 15 at this point, and we're probably going to abandon one another anyways. Again, that was all fine and good because around that same time, a boy band that went on to be the boy band, started to pop up, and we both became obsessed. It was one of the first things we bonded over, and to this day, she's still someone I'd give half of a best friend forever necklace to. And I have Backstreet Boys to thank not only for that, but for being the foundation to a lot of other friendships I hold dear. So Backstreet Boys, thank you for that. But on top of that, Nick Carter. Nick freaking Carter. My prepubescent heart was his from the moment I laid eyes on that blonde hair and As Long As You Love Me during what I think was MTV Live. But of course, I may not have ever gotten a chance to ingrain Backstreet Boys music into the minds of my family if not for the boy bands that came before them. Music snobs may turn their nose up at this, but the Beatles are where I like to say this all began. The hysteria I see in footage during Beatlemania mirrors the complete insanity I saw with my own eyes the first time the Jonas Brothers played Jimmy Kimmel. So to deny that group wasn't a band of attractive guys pushed towards teens and tweens, check the receipts because they were. At first. With their success came bands like the Monkees, a group I think outshines the Beatles because their songs were a hell of a lot better and Davy Jones' vocals fucking stellar. Plus, Peter Tork was a total fox. Oh, I have to mention that you always have to have a favorite boy band member if you're a teeny bopper. It's like written in some holy grail tiger beat somewhere. So the success of the Beatles and the Monkees came at just the right time because teens were starting to, be teens. Things were going well in the world and teenagers no longer had to work in factories and shit. So they were allowed to just go to malt shops and wear poodle skirts and drag race or whatever the hell they were doing in Greece. This also meant they were a new market for media. And the music industry took note. The success of the Beatles and the Monkees were just the beginning. In 1965, Tiger Beat's first issue dropped, and until its last issue in the winter of 2019, the format never really changed. The hottest young stars, or stars aimed at young people, were always plastered on the cover. In the 70s, there were a lot of teen heartthrobs that were either solo singers or actors, but the Jackson 5 really kept the boy band momentum going. So much so that by the end of that decade, New Edition were setting the stage to change the game as we know it. See, a man by the name of Maurice Starr discovered New Edition, and after seeing how well that venture worked out, he decided to reboot the group. This time, with a gang of white boys, aka New Kids on the Block. The way these two groups were pushed in the 80s, the mall performances, the merch, the hysteria, that was a really pivotal moment in boy band history because Starr wasn't the only one working alongside New Kids. Oh no, there was also a man by the name of Johnny Wright. But when New Kids' stars started to fade, Johnny Wright started to work on a new wave of boy bands alongside Lou Pearlman down in the mecca of 90s boy bands, Florida. But before we head down to the state that is basically America's drunk uncle during the holidays, let's discuss the guys that made up New Edition and New Kids on the Block for a second because, like I said, you always have to have a favorite. I think if I were a screaming fangirl back in the 80s, I would have been a Ralph girl when it came to New Edition and a Jordan Knight fanatic in regards to New Kids on the Block because even today, Jordan stands above and beyond his fellow band members. I mean, let's be real. Okay, back to Florida. I know. Florida has been such trash in recent years that many 90s kids can't handle that it was the home of not only so many of our favorite pop acts, but also Nickelodeon Studios. I mean, who else dreamed of being on What Would You Do with Mark Summers? Daydreams aside though, Wright and Perlman got to work, and on April 20th, 1993, Backstreet Boys was whole. Yeah, 1993. I know, you're like, wait, girl, what? I didn't hear about them until a few years later. That's because they were overseas doing what they needed to do to build up their base. Also, in hindsight, I was in kindergarten that year, 4 days from turning 6, and I probably would have missed them if they were huge in the US at that time because at that age, all I cared about was catching Power Rangers after school and oogling Tommy. So Backstreet does their thing overseas, and Perlman thinks like Star did back in the 80s. He's like, I should make another one. And that's why we have the lesser than version in sync. I'm kidding. But let me tell you, back in 1999, you could not like both. You just couldn't. That's a rule that also lies in that Holy Grail Tiger Beat I was talking about somewhere. The rivalry between these two was huge, not only on MTV's TRL, as both boy bands fought for the top spot daily, but in middle schools around the country. No, around the world. Did I eventually give in and admit NSYNC was fine and had jams? Yeah, it was God must have spent a little more time on you. But 12-year-old me would totally kick my ass today if she heard me say that. Anyways, there is a whole documentary on the horrors of Lou Pearlman called The Boy Band Con, and I'm pretty sure you can watch it free on YouTube. I highly recommend it. It has everything: lies, deceit, an incoherent interview with Aaron Carter, all the goodness of a documentary. So watch it if you can today. And I can't forget to mention that with the money those two boy bands were bringing in at the time, many other boy bands popped up. We had 98 Degrees, 5, LFO, Dream Street, O-Town, which came from a reality show Lou Pearlman was involved with, and even a fake boy band MTV put together to mock the boy band craze in a TV movie. But because the magic of boy bands is so strong, Together actually got a fandom all their own. Time for another break before I move on to another era of boy bands. So you already know Nick Carter is my number one from Backstreet Boys, but that's based on nostalgia and him being such a huge foundation on which so many of my crushes that followed were built on. Today, I'm more of an AJ girl. As for their nemesis and sync, Justin Timberlake, problematic, I know, but if we're going based solely on looks in that group back in the day, there wasn't much else aside from JC, who at the time was just as hot for me. Today, Lance Bass all the way. He aged amazingly and stopped with that insane bleached hair that was doing nothing for him. 90 Degrees, no one comes close to Nick Lachey, and if you like Justin from that group, girl, boy, person, what were you thinking? 5 was not packing heat, but the one with spiky hair was like the best they had to offer. LFO, Rich Cronin, which RIP, Dream Street, Chris, another RIP, and O-Town, oh my god. Jacob Underwood was my imaginary boyfriend back then, but like Lance Bass, Dan from O-Town really improved over the years. As for the fake boy band that became a thing, Chad from Together, my forever shy guy. Back to this though, because sadly, all good things must come to an end, and by the turn of the millennium, all of the above just weren't hitting as hard as they once were in their heyday. There was something in the water. Perhaps the fear of Y2K dampened our spirits so much so that bands like Linkin Park started to make more sense than the bubblegum pop we'd been raised on. Plus, We were turning into little asshole teenagers, so as great as NSYNC and Backstreet Boys music was, it wasn't going to cut it when we were feeling all sorts of teen angst, which is why bands like Good Charlotte and Newfound Glory are what I like to refer to as gateway bands to a darker era. But that's another story for another day, because while the popularity of 90s boy bands died down, the all-around boy band magic would return one day. And out of the ashes rose three brothers from New Jersey, armed with the Disney Channel checkbook, and bam, just like that, a new generation was flipping the fuck out over a group of boys once more. It's like someone put out a teeny bopper SOS and the Jonas Brothers were there to save the day. Like I said before, I was there when they played that first Jimmy Kimmel and it was insane. Cuckoo bananas. The age limit for a Kimmel taping in their backlot, about 16 at the time. Of course, Jonas Brother fans were as young as 8, so you had girls making fake IDs at the local Kinko's, and the sound check? If you don't know, Kimmel's larger live performances are taped right outside his studio in a parking lot. Hollywood's glamorous, I know. Anyways, girls were climbing the fence, gripping on barbed wire, trying to see Nick Jonas in all his glory, which I understood, but thankfully, as an elder teeny bopper, I knew how to keep my cool. I'm not judging those girls, because if it was 1999 and Nick Carter was just beyond a fence, I would become an Olympian to jump it. So the Jonas Brothers sort of had zero competition during their heyday because they were clumped into an arena alongside a lot of solo singers, the holy trinity of Disney, if you will, Miley, Demi, and Selena Gomez. When the Jonas Brothers started to fade, Simon Cowell, from whatever the fuck reality show he was on at the time, was right there with Harry Styles. I mean, One Direction, even though I'm a ride or die for the Irish lad. So just like about every other boy band before them, One Direction was made. Simon didn't like them separately and suggested they'd be together as a group, and well, judging by their solo successes today, it's hard to know if he was right at the time or ultimately wrong. You decide on that. Then there is BTS. They got their start way back in 2013, and it's only been in the last few years that the US has become absolutely obsessed with them. And this is the first time since the Beatles that an international boy band has caused such a sensation, and it's magical. Even though I don't really fuck with BTS or know a lot about them, it does warm my heart to see a new group take the torch and keep the boy band magic alive. And they may not last forever, but that's kind of what makes boy bands even more special. It's the fact that every generation has their own, and they become this special moment in time for all of us. Sitting on the phone trying to sync up our Backstreet Boys VHS tapes, our first concert together, turning their Palladium show into a mosh pit when Kevin Richardson showed up on stage for a surprise performance. These are some of the best memories I have with my best friend. And on top of that, trips to Vegas for their residency, staying up late drinking wine, rating their old videos, memories with my other boy band gals that I hold dear. And that's all because I saw Nick Carter on MTV one evening and thought, oh my god, this will be the father of my children. My ultimate boy band crush led me to so much more in life, and I can only imagine that every other teeny bopper has a similar tale to tell about their favorite boy band, and that's the boy band magic. With that, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me talk about boy bands today. We'll be kicking off February with Dana B. Myers, the founder of the Booty Parlor, talking about her celebrity crush, who she actually got to flirt with. Stay tuned for that story and more next week. And until next time, keep crushing it.